Hi everyone. So I thought I would continue the reading from where I stopped yesterday and talk about some of the thoughts that come to mind while reading the poem. I'm just going to continue reading and I'll stop where I want to project some ideas and pause and discuss and then continue with the reading again. Still the star stood there, still beyond mere sorrow, beyond what may be told and what may not, beyond the burning calms, and each soul a window, illumined by their petrifying ripostas, and every breathed out word reflected on the melting surfaces, the spines of what will survive us, both scaffold and shipwreck, as the more dangerous stories become air and violet moths, and each spark an oblivious brute annulment of the white glare of departure. Whiteness, the height that reigns and sets to right the rightless, ingloried leaven as we flame out, burnt to a crisp, incinerare. The whiteness of place unplaced beyond language, the last refuge of loss, and the unburned waiting, awaited word cast out without hope or arrival. This paper is on fire. Um, So, in yesterday, I was speaking about how language fails to um, possess the requisite means for representing blackness. And today, I will kind of go about that same idea and kind of point towards Marriott's own theoretical writings regarding that idea. Um, in Lacan, Marriott refers to one of the essays by Lacan, The Agency of the Letter in the Unconscious of Reason since Freud, 1957, and kind of talks about how that essay looks into the binaries of light and darkness as it is manifested in language through metaphors. For example, he talks about how Lacan talks about how there is illumination of thought, and he says that whenever the word tree is used, it invariably brings to mind the shadow of the cross. So there's always a play of light and dark in language, which gives the reader the sense that language is a pre-existing structure and the essence of its pre-existent nature is white. The reason why it is white is because of its inherent, inbuilt, close relation with Christianity. So that is something which Lacan writes about in his essay, and that is something which Marriott also refers to in Lacan Noir. So, in this writing, particularly whiteness, the height that reigns and sets to right, the rightless, ingloried, leaven as we flame out, burnt to a crisp, incinerare. It brings to mind the idea that language disowns blackness. Language disowns blackness and everything that characterizes blackness. The very materiality of blackness is eroded, and is eroded because the words too get burnt with the burning of the paper. This paper is on fire, which results in the words being smudged out completely, reconfigured into ash, and that is something which is important for us to consider. um, I will continue with the reading. Where even names go missing and the earth's lapsed, burnt out symbol is a medium, a building, its cladding explodes here over tumbling, heaven drenched air. This paper burns itself, it ascends over the words, black, shadowless stains, and what it unveils, it eradicates. The lives lifelessly resident in unlived places, where no one wants to live, towering over what seizes in the flames. The charred remains rising beyond thresholds of belonging, unliving. So again, this is very interesting. As I mentioned earlier, Lacan gives us the sense that whiteness is characteristic of the pre-existent structure of language, into which the materiality of the letter finds itself as an intruder. And this is actually developed further by Marriott and connected with blackness, where he says that there is an inability on part of the black self to identify with the I in language, because it invariably represents a flaw, an essence which is infinitely black, whose blackness um, cannot be identified with. So that is something which Marriott argues in Lacan, and this is what is alluded towards in these lines. It ascends over the words black, shadowless stains, and what it unveils, it eradicates the lives lifelessly resident in unlived places where no one wants to live, towering over what seizes in the flames. The charred remains rising beyond thresholds. And so this tug and pull between making oneself appear in language, making representing blackness in language, and at the same time finding that language disowns it or identifies blackness as a lack. That tug and pull is kind of played here in catastrophic scale, with the Grenfell disaster as the context of this particular poem. So that is how the poem develops. Incinerare, it rapidly crosses the open and the remains inside the ear, that crosses what passes on, blackness sifted, blanched, let go, dumped, left in dismay. Grenfell. This paper is on fire. It cannot breathe. It will crumble into dust like a building that forms itself into a word, the tapping of an ashen wing that frees itself from everything that is air. Oh, my unhoused chevalier, become a weightless slave, that no room confines and no refuge as a fire while were speaking itself. The word due, expectant, but so ruinously unplanned, a kind of death trap for the word owing, to grasp in order to never be grasped, by the ungrasped always, suspended, freed from descent as well as any rescue lived for, the paper unwilling. And so again, as I wanted to kind of point towards, the whiteness of place becomes almost synonymous with the whiteness of this existing structure of language that threatens to snuff out blackness. Um, for you and I, descent meant rescue, but there was smoke all around us, and our mistake was in thinking that language meant expectancy or survival, and not something endlessly abandoned, evacuated, a word petrified, then cracked, a void endlessly imprinted, shaped into concrete. So, again, very interesting. The word that he indicates towards in these lines, these concluding lines of the poem, a word petrified, then cracked, a void endlessly imprinted, shaped into concrete, could very well signify blackness, could very well be the signifier of blackness. Um, and what is important is that uh, these lines are not something endlessly abandoned, evacuated. The fact that language could mean something along the lines of expectancy or survival gives one the sense that that the reader can still possess certain hopes about the figurations of blackness in language, even though language constantly, both symbolically and in the case of the Grenfell Tower, legislatively disowns blackness and sees it as lack. There is that certain sense that language could mean expectancy or survival, although the poem seems to point towards the fact that it can't do that. It can't point towards expectancy or survival. That it is, in fact, endlessly abandoned, evacuated. But I'm just thinking about whether there can be a certain narrative of um, 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 narrative of um, emplacing the events of the Grenfell alongside measures that have been taken to kind of prevent such disasters from happening again. So I'm just wondering uh, if that kind of a juxtaposition can in fact be possible. Of course, I've been reading a lot of literature on utopia and utopic thinking. So possibly my strain of thought right now is kind of conditioned by that kind of thinking. But obviously, something to remember that juxtaposing these spaces. The space of disaster with the space of legislative amelioration. Both of them can coexist. So, possibly something to think about. Um, and again, what Marriott says at the end, a word petrified, then cracked, a void endlessly imprinted, shaped into concrete. He talks about blackness in Lacan, obviously in Lacan, but also in one of his essays called Copsing, where he says that, blackness is neither the coming of a plenitude or a posthumous self erasure, nor is it merely the reversed return under the glimpse of theory to authenticity, not to mention the redemptive capacity of a no-win wager. So that is how blackness is characterized for Marriott. Neither the coming of a plenitude nor a posthumous self-erasure. As we saw with regards to the idea of negritude, that blackness can never be recovered as essence through the descriptions of suffering. So that is not possible, and neither is it a posthumous self-erasure. So writing about the charring of blackness or the violation of blackness through this process of burning, it is incapable of recovering blackness. So that is important to consider. And at the end, towards the end, one gets to a sense, reading these lines alongside the ones that I quoted from Lacan, gives one the sense that blackness can only be understood as what it is not, uh, rather than what it can possibly signify, because language does not possess the means or the tools for describing blackness. So that was my reading of Another Burning. I hope it was interesting. Thank you.